the heart of a quaint town, where cobblestone streets wound their way through ancient buildings, there existed a little antique shop known only to a select few. Its windows fogged with age, its door creaking with each tentative push, the shop held treasures and relics from a forgotten era. But among the dusty shelves and forgotten artifacts, there sat a doll that seemed to draw the eye with an unsettling magnetism. Its porcelain face, once delicately painted with rosy cheeks and bright eyes, now held a twisted grin that seemed to mock those who dared to gaze upon it. Its glassy eyes followed visitors with an unnerving intensity, as if it were watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The shopkeeper, an elderly man with a gaze as sharp as the edge of a blade, warned all who dared to inquire about the doll. His voice, heavy with the weight of countless warnings ignored, carried a solemn tone as he recounted the tales of horror that surrounded the doll. Tales of unexplained phenomena, of whispers in the dead of night, and of those who had dared to possess it, only to meet a fate worse than death. But despite the warnings, there were always those who were drawn to the doll's malevolent odor. And so it was that one fateful day, a collector with a hunger for the macabre stepped through the door of the antique shop, their eyes alight with a feverish excitement. Ignoring the shopkeeper's cautionary words, the collector approached the doll with trembling hands, their heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. With each step closer, the air grew thick with an oppressive sense of dread, as if the very walls of the shop were closing in around them. As the collector reached out to touch the doll, a shiver ran down their spine, and they hesitated for just a moment before grasping it firmly in their hands. In that instant, a cold wind swept through the shop, extinguishing the flickering candles that lined the walls, plunging the room into darkness. With a trembling hand, the collector fumbled for their phone, its feeble light casting long, twisted shadows across the room. And there, illuminated by the pale glow of the screen, they saw it. The doll's grin twisted into a malevolent sneer, its eyes alight with a fiery intensity that seemed to pierce straight through to the soul. That night, as the collector lay in bed, the doll sat perched on the dresser across the room, its presence looming over them like a dark cloud. And as they drifted off into a fitful sleep, they could swear they heard the faint sound of childish laughter echoing through the darkness. But as the days turned into weeks, the laughter grew louder, the shadows darker, until the collector found themselves consumed by a terror unlike anything they had ever known. Objects moved of their own accord, whispers echoed through empty rooms, and the once familiar surroundings became a labyrinth of fear and paranoia. Desperate for answers, the collector sought the help of a renowned paranormal investigator, their voice trembling as they recounted the horrors that had befallen them since bringing the doll into their home. Together, they delved into the doll's dark past, uncovering the tragic tale of a young girl whose spirit had become trapped within its porcelain prison. Bound by an ancient curse, the girl's restless soul sought vengeance upon all who dared to possess the doll, feeding off their fear and despair until there was nothing left but empty husks of humanity. And as the investigator performed a ritual meant to banish the malevolent entity once and for all, the collector watched in horror as the doll's porcelain frame cracked and splintered, releasing a blood-curdling scream that seemed to echo through the very depths of their soul. But even as the flames consumed the doll, its malevolent presence lingered, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the veil of reality. And as the collector lay awake at night, listening to the whispers that echoed through the darkness, they realized that some nightmares never truly end. Nestled deep within the heart of an ancient forest, where the trees whispered secrets of forgotten times and the mist hung heavy in the air like a shroud, stood the decaying remains of an asylum, a place where the echoes of madness still reverberated through the crumbling walls. As the explorers approached, a sense of unease settled over them like a suffocating blanket, the weight of the asylum's dark history pressing down upon their shoulders. They had heard the tales, the stories of unspeakable horrors that had taken place within its walls, of patients subjected to torturous treatments in the name of science, and of the spirits that had never found rest. But despite the warnings, they pressed on, their footsteps muffled by the thick undergrowth that carpeted the forest floor. The air grew colder with each step, and the once familiar sounds of the forest fell silent, replaced by an eerie stillness that seemed to seep into their very bones. As they entered the asylum's grounds, they were greeted by a sight that sent shivers down their spines. The building loomed before them like a sleeping giant, its windows broken and its doors hanging askew on rusted hinges. Vines snaked their way up the walls, weaving a tangled web of decay and neglect. With each tentative step into the asylum's depths, the darkness closed in around them, swallowing them whole as they ventured further into its labyrinthine corridors. Shadows danced in the corners of their vision, flickering and shifting as if they were alive, and the air grew thick with the stench of decay. Strange symbols adorned the walls, their meaning lost to time, and the faint sound of whispers echoed through the darkness, their words twisted and distorted by the passage of years. The explorers pressed on, their hearts pounding in their chests as they searched for answers in the bowels of the asylum. But as they delved deeper into its heart, they soon realized that they were not alone. Figures moved in the darkness, their forms shifting and twisting with each passing moment, and the very walls seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy that sent chills down their spines. Doors slammed shut with a deafening finality, trapping the explorers in a nightmare from which there seemed to be no escape. Panic set in as they frantically searched for a way out, their minds consumed by a primal fear that threatened to consume them whole. In a desperate bid to flee the asylum's clutches, they raced towards the exit, their footsteps echoing through the empty halls as they fled into the night. But as they crossed the threshold into the outside world, they realized with a sinking feeling that they had unwittingly unleashed something far more sinister than they could have ever imagined. For in the darkness of the asylum's depths, something ancient and malevolent stirred, a force beyond comprehension, fueled by centuries of pain and suffering. And as the last echoes of their screams faded into the night, the asylum stood silent once more, its secrets buried deep within its crumbling walls, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to stumble upon its dark embrace. Perched atop a mist-shrouded mountain, where the air was thin and the world seemed to fade into obscurity, there lay a village that had been lost to time, a place whispered about in hushed tones by those who dared to speak its name. According to legend, the village had been cursed by a vengeful spirit, a force of darkness that had condemned its inhabitants to a fate worse than death. As the explorers ascended the treacherous slopes of the mountain, their breath coming in ragged gasps and their hearts pounding in their chests, they could feel the weight of the village's dark history pressing down upon them like a suffocating blanket. The mist clung to their skin, obscuring their vision and muffling the sounds of the outside world until all that remained was a palpable sense of dread. But despite the warnings, they pressed on, their determination outweighing their fear as they ventured deeper into the heart of the mist-enshrouded mountain. And as they reached the summit and the village came into view, they realized with a sinking feeling that something was terribly wrong. The buildings stood silent and empty, their windows dark, and their doors hanging askew on rusted hinges. There was no sign of life, no sound save for the mournful howling of the wind as it whipped through the deserted streets. The village seemed to fade in and out of existence, its very presence tenuous and fleeting. Undeterred, the explorers pressed on, their footsteps echoing through the mist as they ventured deeper into the heart of the village. Strange symbols adorned the walls of the buildings, their meaning lost to time, and the very air seemed to hum with a palpable sense of dread. With each step closer to the village's heart, the world around them seemed to warp and shift, twisting reality into a nightmarish landscape from which there was no escape. Shadows flitted through the mist, their forms shifting and twisting with each passing moment, and the explorers could feel the eyes of unseen entities watching their every move. In a desperate bid to flee the village's grasp, they retraced their steps, their hearts pounding with fear as they raced towards the edge of the mountain. But as they reached the precipice and turned to look back one last time, they realized with a sinking feeling that the village had vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but empty space and the lingering echo of their own terrified screams. For in the darkness of the mist-enshrouded mountain, something ancient and malevolent stirred, a force beyond comprehension, fueled by centuries of pain and suffering. And as the last echoes of their screams faded into the night, the mountain stood silent once more, its secrets buried deep within its mist-shrouded depths, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to stumble upon its dark embrace.